This is my video response to the ethics of living Jim Crow. First up, I'll start with characterization. Richard, the black boy, he was a fighter. We learned this from him fighting with the white children when he was throwing the coals and they were chucking the broken milk bottles at him. We found out that he respects his mother when she scalded him for fighting with the white people. But he also listened to her and tried to learn from the Jim Crow laws that he taught or that she taught to him. We know that he wants to work his way up in the world because they stated it. So even though he's a black man, he still wants to try and work his way to higher rankings in the professional world. And we do know that he is intelligent because he's able to go to the library with the white man's card and read books and teach himself things. And that is also one of the reasons that he got kicked out of the optical factory, was because he was getting too smart and white people began to be scared that he was going to take their jobs. Next up is his mom. We know that she works as a cook for a white family. We definitely know that she fears white people and believes them to be superior. We know this because even after her child was severely hurt and cut by the broken bottles that the white children threw at him, she still beat him because he fought with them, and that's against the Jim Crow laws. Next we have Pease, who was one of Richard's co-workers at the optical factory. He accused Richard of calling him Pease instead of Mr. Pease, which apparently back then it was extremely disrespectful for a black man to refer to a white person without using the word Mr. or Mrs. He wanted Richard out of the factory because, again, he was getting too smart and he felt threatened by Richard because he didn't want to lose his job to him. Next we have Maury, who was another co-worker of Richard. Maury also worked at the optical factory. He wanted Richard out of the factory because he was getting too smart and, again, felt threatened that Richard was going to take his job. Next up, there's Richard's boss from the clothing store. He beat a black girl almost to death for not paying her bills, so we know that he obviously wasn't the greatest person. We have the cop on the clothing store corner. He arrested the black girl after she was beaten badly because she stumbled out of the store, and he accused her of being drunk even though he had seen the boss beat and drag her into the store in the first place. Next we have the man in the car who offered Richard a ride when his bike broke. They threw a whiskey bottle at Richard's head and knocked him off of the speeding vehicle just because Richard didn't refer to them as sir when he declined to take a drink with them. Then we have the police officers who ran Richard off the road in the white neighborhood at night. They did this for no reason, and they made him get down and put his hands up and searched all of his pockets and packages that he hadn't delivered yet for the clothing company. Next we'll move on to themes of this story. The major theme, and really the only theme of this story in my opinion, is oppression. There's a gazillion examples that I jotted down, so I'll go through those. The first is that blacks had to live in the crappy parts of town. In the beginning of the story, Richard and his mom and the rest of his black friends and family were forced to live on the other side of the tracks where there was constant filth and coals and things thrown from the trains, and they couldn't even grow grass because of this. The next is that blacks were considered inferior to white folks. We know this because the blacks could do anything, or the whites could do anything to black people, and they could get away with it. And even, Richard's mom scalded him for doing nothing except defend himself. Third, white folks could, I already said that. Alright, we're going to skip on to the next one. Fourth one is the black parents even enforced the Jim Crow laws on their own children. We all know nowadays how unfair the Jim Crow laws were, so the fact that black parents are enforcing this on their own children shows just how oppressed they really were. Next, we have the policeman who watched the store boss of the clothing store beat her and drag her into the store and then arrest her for being drunk when she stumbled out because she was beaten so badly she couldn't walk. This is obviously ridiculous and shows major oppression because, I mean, how is it fair that the girl be arrested for doing nothing wrong and when she's already having enough of a rough time from being beaten so badly for not doing anything in the first place? Next up, for oppression, we have the men in the car who offered him a ride again. After they had blasted him off of the car and he fell and was bleeding badly, they told him that he was lucky because if anyone else had heard him not refer to them as sir, he would probably be dead. So obviously, that's a huge sign of oppression because why would you ever kill someone just for not referring to you as sir? Next, we have the cops that ran Richard off the road. They literally ran him off the road and searched him just for the fact that he was a black man in a white neighborhood at night. After they had searched him and found nothing wrong, they told him to tell his boss not to send him into white neighborhoods anymore. So this is pretty much the biggest black and white example of oppression that there is, saying stay out of white neighborhoods. Next up, we have the fat man that had the fat blonde prostitute in the hotel. The man told Richard not to look at the prostitute if he didn't want to get beat. Next up, we have the police that forced two black people to get married just because they accused the young black man of bastardy. And then once they were forced to be married, the woman had a child and the child was half white. So it was clear that the black man had been innocent in the first place and that they were wrong in forcing them to get married. And on top of that, the white man then harassed her about her baby. Next up is the black man being caught in bed with a white prostitute. They castrated him and they ran him out of town and threatened to kill any other black person who did this. It's a pretty clear sign of oppression since the white men were allowed to sleep with the prostitutes and it was, encouraged because it brought money. Next is Richard was walking with a black woman that he found attractive and a white man smacked her on the butt. Richard was offended by this, but the white man made him admit that he liked it, or forced him to say that he liked it, and it clearly made him uncomfortable, and that's clearly not fair to do that to a woman in the first place. Finally, Richard had to use a white man's library card just to get books out of the library, and on top of that, he had to forge letters saying that a white man told him to go and pick the books up for the white man, not even that he could take them to read for himself. So that's a clear sign of oppression that black people were not allowed to have any kind of, what do I want to say here, literary works. And the final, a symbol from the book that they clearly stated was that Richard, even after many years had passed, the white houses surrounded by trees, lawns, and hedges symbolized fear for him because that's where the white people used to live, and he had such a bad experience when he was a child with the bottles and the kids. So that is kind of my video summary of the ethics of living Jim Crow for this week. Thank you for listening.